minutes. So I'm Pavel. I run a company called FastNetMon, and we develop on-premise DDoS detection solution. So on this presentation, I will talk about my own journey for my own household, about making it a little bit more IPv6 friendly. So those are my contacts, and that's the place where I live. It looks like from marketing presentation, neat, slick, cool. Reality is this. It's just next to Old Street. And basically, every 2 weeks, I see yet another company digging my payment, like this way. And today was just amazing time, because when I woke up and left my home, I noticed yet more crowd around, look this way, from OpenReach. And exactly, my payment right now looks exactly this way. So I have lots of cables next to my building. But the issue is getting noise connectivity and business proximity to building. It's not nice. So that's what I have at home. I have nice, actually my favorite provider called HyperOptic. It's their latest CPE from Nokia, which is, I would say, quite decent one. That's my center of my flat. And you can see it's not in perfect condition, but it's well enough. And you can see lots of cables. Why on earth I have so many cables? The answer is simple. I still like playing Xbox. And sometimes you need to download 50 gigabytes of upload for minor one, for Fortnite, for example. That's why I prefer to keep it on cables. And let's go into details, what we have here. So, and again, most of the appliances in my flat, Xbox, my PC, my lab, connected via cables. And it's one of the, I would say, slowest networks. I have second one, which is 25G based, and unfortunately it's not used for internet, but mostly for packet generation and XDP lab. So, and it's my PC, again, connected via cables. And this one is my laptop, unfortunately still connected via Wi-Fi. And you can see it's not assembled yet, but now it looks way better, I can show. And actually, I can recommend, it's actually a great brand of laptops, framework. I have no complaints, and it works very nice. And this one is the most complex one. It's EPIC based. It has free 25G cards from Linux, has lots of CPU, lots of cores, and I use it for packet generation. And that's the smartest part. So that's how it starts changes. So basically my idea was to isolate part of my network instead of moving everything to IPv6, and unfortunately there is no such way. Because what I'm looking for, because of I do lots of experiments, and as part of development for FastNetMon, we need to experiment and run it in IPv6 only environment. I mean, and removing complete access to IPv4 is not easy. Even if you use cloud providers, data centers, it's not easy to find service which can easily provide IPv6 only experience. Most of the time, even if you buy something, you still have IPv4. And my idea was easiest to create part of my home network which has no IPv4 at all. So basically, when I feel something like ping 8888, it will answer, no such connectivity, sorry. Not available. That was my point, because I wanted to test if all applications I use on daily basis will work in an environment where actually IPv4 is not available at all. And my idea was to build a NAT64 gateway. It's based on single board computer. This one costs like $60. And it's very nice, it's very powerful, and it has native support for Debian, so you don't need to download custom builds. You just can use official Debian image to flash it, and it will work just fine. So, and what's first? As first step, I deployed Unbound. And it was first step to enable support for legacy applications. As a software developer, my main legacy application, which has no support for IPv6, is a GitHub. I cannot live without it, unfortunately, because at some point of time, I just unplugged IPv4, and I was happy enough for a short period of time. When I look at Facebook, when I open Twitter, most of the internet worked fine, but then I started work. And unfortunately, I cannot survive without GitHub. That's why as first step, I deployed Unbound and enabled DNS64. Idea of DNS64, if you're not familiar with this concept, to provide synthetically generated fake IPv6 quad A records which carry IPv6 addresses and which point instead of to service itself to small appliance in your own home network. That's exactly the purpose why I showed you on the previous slide my NAT64 gateway. So it's the first step. How it works? So basically, again, my favorite GitHub, when you ask what is a quad A record, normally, if you just started and without any changes on your DNS server side, it will reply, I don't know, I don't have IPv6 support. But in my case, because of I run special version of Unbound with DNS64 enabled in configuration, we can see synthetic record generated this way. So basically, this prefix 64FF9B is a prefix which is announced by my NAT64 gateway, which runs in my network. So next part is quite simple. I use a Taiga as NAT64 gateway. Why I use Taiga? Because usually people refer it as a very slow one. And issue was because my SBC board is ARM-based, and building kernel models for alternative gateways is not easy, but this one is complete software implementation and can run on any platform if you want, for example, PowerPC or ARM. And what next? As a next step, again, instead of moving all my network to IPv6 only, which will very likely broke lots of applications, and unfortunately I still have smart home system built in something around 20,020, which has no support for IPv6. So I had choice to enable IPv6 for part of my network or lose option to manage my smart home. I decided to enable it only for my work PC as a first step. So we need to change DNS server because standard one has no support for DNS64. And second thing is I need to add custom route because this specific prefix, which is used by Unbound to synthesize records for domains which have non-native support for IPv6, need to be routed somewhere. And we need to provide this information in custom configuration of Ubuntu. And in this case, you can see it's custom route. It specifies my gateway, which runs again in my network in my home. So, and my favorite part. I'm waiting for a moment when I can do it without any other changes. Just unplug it and forget. And everything will keep working. I hope at some point of time. So let's connect. Finally, we have GitHub. We have no IPv4 on my machine. And most of the stuff works. Annoying part of it, as a next step, because enabling IPv6 for my work PC is nice, but again, my next idea was to enable it for my phone. And for phone, you cannot easily create custom routes. I can change DNS for my phone, but I cannot change custom routes. That's why we have a nice tool called array DVD, which can use array advertisement to announce prefix or special prefix used by DNS64 and NAT64 in our network. So after making this change, my gateway, which runs again in my network, started announcing, okay, I know about this prefix and I'm in charge of this prefix. And then we can simplify our configuration to only changing DNS. And this approach also works for phone. So at this moment of time, I have phone working on IPv6 only network, and I have my PC working on IPv6 only network, which is nice as hell. It was first thing which annoyed me, Spotify. Fortunately, it's not an issue. I was disappointed by Spotify for quite a long time, and I just decided to give up on it, and I bought CD player and bunch of again, at some point of time, you get tired with technical solutions and use just very not technical solution. And you know, my CD player has no firmware, has no operating system, doesn't need any updates. You know, it's very good for my mental health. So I gave up on Spotify. Next thing was Signal. The issue is we use Signal for work, and I cannot avoid it, and I cannot ignore it. It was some blocker, and it was something I cannot ignore. And at some point of time, I had to enable IPv4 again, which annoyed me a lot. What was the issue? Signal application for desktop on Linux uses Electron. Internally, Electron uses Node.js, it's JavaScript framework. The issue is implementation of happy eyeballs for Node.js is not perfect, and it works following way. If server, for example, for specific domain, in this case, signal.com has A records, it will never ever try to use IPv6 records. What happened in my case? Why exactly we see this one? Application tries to get A records, successfully receives A records, and that tries to connect, and it fails. And Node.js had no option to skip and try quad A records and use it via IPv6. In latest version of Node.js, it was updated, but again, because of delay between Node.js, Electron, and Signal app, it wasn't available. So I started digging. I'm not alone, fortunately. I found nice feedback and long conversation on GitHub in Signal desktop app. What is the issue? And some people recommended that there is an option if you can suppress A records completely, it will not try to connect them. So what we did, I emulated environment where Signal has none of the CDNs which belong to Signal have A records. It wasn't easy, and it ended up to be a nice project. So in this case, I tried and actually successfully patched Unbound to implement new option, and this option called block_A. So if you're an Unbound in your network, it's already part of upstream, and you can suppress artificially A records for specific domain, if you don't like them, like me. So, and from having this error, and from working on this patch for quite a while, and this one is not immediate. It happened 2 months later. Block A capability I introduced it to fix my Signal app. Now it's a part of upstream and may serve your purpose. And my idea was to move forward in future to just experiment and block A records completely and look what happens and how application in health. Because again, having to request A record and then quad A records, again, it's during time when we transition to IPv6. And at some point of time, I hope we will abandon A records completely. So, how it looks in configuration? In this configuration, I just suppressed A records for every single host used by Signal CDN. And here you go. It was last blocker for me. I spent in total about 1 month to fix every single app. And right now, I can use every single app I need for work, for entertainment. Remember about my CD player. I don't need IPv6. And next thing is, my idea to have IPv6 only flat still sometimes had consideration that at some point of time I will need to access IPv4 internet. And for my idea, VPN can be used as gateway to legacy internet. Let's imagine IPv6 only household, but when you urgently need IPv4, you may use Mozilla VPN or Malware or different providers to connect to them via IPv6 and use legacy internet. Because again, you don't need it on a daily basis. You need it sometimes, maybe for some testing. And unfortunately, it did not work. And then I tried Mulat, exactly same issue. And both of those issues are still ongoing. And unfortunately, they are not because of lack of IPv6 support on their side. It's just because of incorrect way how both application, in this case, Mozilla VPN or Malware, they detect that we have connectivity to IPv4 internet or connectivity to IPv6 internet. They cannot distinguish when we don't have one. And basically, what happens in case of Mozilla, connection works just fine. But Mozilla app cannot understand that we have connection because of their status host they use for confirming, okay, VPN works fine, relies on IPv4. And both of those issues are reported, and I hope at some point of time they will be fixed. And as part of my test recently, when I tried to repeat it and confirm that it's still an issue, I found nice thing. For example, in Mozilla, it's quite rare. They added support for IPv6. So basically, if you connect for IPv4 only environment, you have no IPv6 at all, unfortunately. When you connect to Mozilla, it will work fine, and you will have IPv6. So, and it's worked opposite way. So you may use VPN to connect to legacy internet, as in my case, what I tried to do, but in opposite side, you can use VPN to connect to modern internet, because in many environments, for example, when I travel, I don't have access for IPv6 in most of the places, unfortunately, and that's why I have to use sometimes VPN. So you can find out all the details, how it was, and every single bug I reported here. And generally, my finding was because to be person who encourages people to use IPv6. I have to do it on my own. And I would say for me it works. Of course, my case is far away from everyone of you. But just confirmation that most of the things work fine over IPv6. And I do it for more than 2 years. And I did not face any issues. And majority of issues, they can be solved via some workarounds, or after all, we can replace some tools. And I think for me, it was more like confirmation to be sure that it's definitely ready for production use. It can be used. There are no major blockers. And I hope at some point of time, we will plug a switch about IPv4 support globally for all internet and forget about it. Thank you.
Any questions? Well, I'll come at you for one, because I'm running an IPv6 setup at home mostly as well, but I've gone the IPv6 mostly route instead of IPv6 only, and I'm using Joule instead of Tega. You're not a Steam user then, I take it?
That was one of the cases why I actually tried to use Mozilla. Yes, Steam unfortunately doesn't support IPv6. So, but for this case, I have Xbox, which is quite available via IPv6.
Okay, after having heard about it today, do you think you'll look at IPv6 mostly with DHCP option 108 and CLATDs and things like that?
So, I think there is a different option to run it, but unfortunately my finding was I still had to keep IPv4 enabled for parts of my network. So for example, system which controls my heating and my lighting in my flat is IPv4 only, and that's why I tried to build it separately from, like, instead of moving from whole household to IPv6, I tried to keep it separately only for my experiments. But I would say some more and more services introduce support for IPv6, and I hope Steam will be one of them. Because for games, it's clearly beneficial to use IPv6. It's better latency, and you don't have issues with port traversal, and you don't need any port translation. You don't need UPnP. And for gamers' experience, I think IPv6 is way better. And what I heard from people from Xbox, they're happy about IPv6, and it works way better for them.
Well, thank you for that. You identified there 3, and Graham's mentioned a 4th quite common application that has problems with v6 only. Is there a resource anywhere you're aware of that sort of lists the common applications that have these sort of problems? Have you found one, or do you know of one?
Website with failing applications.
Where might one find a list of applications that have issues running v6 only?
So for my case, like, that's all application I had issues with. So, and I remember there is a website, but it's mostly abandoned, where people try to maintain applications which have issues with different implementations because again, my idea was to replicate one of the cases. It's not IPv6, it's not dual stack, it's not 64 deployment. It's also a special case. It needs to be handled in special way. But I think, like, if we have some resource which will allow us to track down this app has issues and name and shame from one conference to another, maybe it will work. Because again, I have strong feeling, because I visited around a dozen conferences over the last 2 years, and IPv6 is getting into mainstream. So majority of conferences have mention of IPv6, and for me it's huge change, because I remember having same agenda for years, we barely had one presentation about IPv6. It mostly was like, oh my God, it's for experimental use, it's not going to happen. But now it's like, those presentations from Vodafone and Sky, they're just impressive. And it's finally happening.
Any more questions? Okay, one final one from me then. Why the well-known prefix? Why are you using the well-known prefix and not something out of the range that you've been delegated by your ISP?
I don't know. It was just simpler for me. So the issue is actually the issue is hyperoptic, that their prefix changes from time to time. I tried to check with their support, is it stable or not, and they weren't able to confirm. So they confirmed that it may change at some point of time. That's why I just decided to use simpler options.
So dynamic prefix means you can't set things up properly. Okay.
Yeah, yes, unfortunately. And I tried different options, so it's not well covered. But what I tried to do, so of course I have prefix delegation from ISP to CPE. But what I tried to do, and unfortunately it did not work well, I tried to ask from my PC to ask for smaller prefix via prefix delegation from CPE itself. And unfortunately, I don't think that there is any CPE implementation which actually may support it, but
Tom, does that come into the snack stuff that's working on at the IETF, do you know? The sub-delegation from CPE?
Not just snack. Yes, there is work going on.
Yeah, it will be great because, again, my case is completely artificial, but for example, for cases if you run many Docker applications, it may be beneficial to have something like /96. Or if you have multiple like devices in your network to get part of network. And for me, it was main issue. My idea was to extract part of my prefix, my proper prefix I got from ISP, and to my small part of my network, which is IPv6 only. And that's why I have to build this part of it, because I wasn't able to easily carve part of prefix.
Basically sub-prefix delegations. From the CPU.
No, yeah, I get that. I mean, Eric went through a load of drafts that were relevant to that. I know Jen will know more about them than I will, for sure. So have a quick word with Jen.
I will do. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay.